Welcome back. This is the next chapter of Lost in the Northern Wilds, where we last left off with Thomas Leclair in the midst of a fierce battle, facing a world that's far bigger than he ever imagined. Let's jump right back into the story and see what happens next.
Lost in the Northern Wilds. Part 2. The wind howled through the frozen trees, carrying whispers of a war that would never make the pages of history. Thomas Leclair lay on the snow-covered ground, his breath shallow, his body racked with pain. The bullet wound in his shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, sending waves of agony through him. Above him, Marguerite loomed like a specter, her face unreadable in the flickering torchlight.
You still don't understand, do you?
She murmured, her voice lost amidst the wailing wind.
There is no escaping this, Thomas. You are part of it now.
Darkness threatened to pull him under once more, but he fought it. He needed answers. He needed to understand what he had stumbled into. With great effort, he forced his eyes open, locking onto hers.
What are you talking about?
Marguerite sighed, then motioned to someone behind her. Rough hands grabbed Thomas, hoisting him up onto his feet. He groaned in pain, his vision swimming, but he remained conscious. The stranger in pelts, the man who had first captured him, stood nearby, his arms crossed, his presence radiating an air of quiet authority.
Take him back to camp.
The man ordered.
He'll live. But he needs to learn.
Days passed in a feverish blur. Thomas was given food and medicine, but little information. He lay on a cot in a dimly lit tent, listening to the murmurs outside. The camp was alive with activity, filled with men and women who moved with purpose. Some were trappers, hardened and scarred by years in the wilderness. Others bore the disciplined posture of former soldiers, deserters who had found a new cause. And then there were the native warriors, watching everything in silence, their faces unreadable. When Thomas was finally well enough to stand, Marguerite came to him. She carried a bowl of steaming broth, setting it down beside him before taking a seat on a nearby crate. For a long moment, neither spoke. The tension between them was thick, weighed down by unspoken truths.
You are wondering why we haven't killed you.
Marguerite finally said. Thomas scoffed, shifting in his cot.
The thought had crossed my mind.
She gave him a wry smile.
You were not meant to discover us, that much is true. But now that you have, we need to know if you can be trusted.
Trusted for what?
Marguerite
leaned forward, her expression serious.
This land is not just a battleground between Britain and France. There are those of us who fight for something greater. A world where neither empire controls these lands. A world where we, the ones who truly live here, decide our own fate.
Thomas studied her carefully.
You're talking about rebellion?
Call it what you will. But we are done being pawns in a game played by people in distant cities.
A heavy silence fell between them. Thomas had spent years navigating the politics of the fur trade, where loyalties shifted like the wind. He had always thought himself above such conflicts, surviving on his own terms. But now, he realized, he was trapped in something much larger.
And what do you want from me?
He asked cautiously. Marguerite sighed.
We need allies. People who know the land, who understand how to survive. You have skills we can use. And, whether you like it or not, you are already marked. The British will hunt you if you try to return to them. The French, too. Your only chance now is to choose a side.
Thomas exhaled sharply. It was true. He had seen too much. He had no illusions about what would happen if he tried to return to civilization. The moment he stepped into any settlement, he would be taken, interrogated, tortured, perhaps even executed as a spy. He had no choice. The weeks that followed transformed Thomas in ways he never could have imagined. He trained alongside the others, learning the ways of the hidden war unfolding in the northern wilds. He learned how to move unseen through the forests, how to set traps not just for animals, but for men. He learned the language of the native warriors who fought beside them, understanding their customs, their grievances, their hopes for a future free from colonial rule. And he learned more about Marguerite. She was more than a leader. She was a symbol. A woman who had cast off the chains of empire and built something new in the wilderness. People followed her not because they had to, but because they believed in her. And slowly, Thomas began to believe too. But the war would not wait. One cold morning, scouts returned with dire news. A British patrol had discovered one of their supply caches. More soldiers were coming. If they did not act first, the entire camp would be destroyed. A decision was made. That night, under the cover of darkness, Thomas rode with the others toward the British encampment. The air was thick with tension, each warrior knowing that by dawn, blood would stain the snow. As they neared the enemy camp, Thomas felt a strange calm settle over him. He had spent his life surviving, drifting from one place to another, never truly belonging. But here, in this moment, he had found a purpose. Marguerite caught his eye as they crept through the trees, her expression unreadable. Then she gave a small nod, and the signal was given. The battle began. Gunfire shattered the stillness of the night. Shadows danced in the firelight as men fought, knives flashing, muskets roaring. Thomas moved through the chaos like a ghost, striking where the enemy was weakest. He saw Marguerite cutting through soldiers with the precision of a seasoned warrior, her wolfskin cloak billowing as she moved. By dawn, it was over. The British camp lay in ruins, its survivors scattered. But the victory was not without cost. Marguerite had been wounded. Thomas found her kneeling in the snow, blood staining her cloak. He rushed to her side, pressing a hand against the wound.
Stay with me.
She gave him a tired smile.
It seems even legends bleed.
They had won the battle. But the war was far from over. And Thomas Leclair knew, without a doubt, that he would see it through to the end. He was no longer lost in the northern wilds. He had found his place within them. As the camp gathered in the aftermath of the battle, Thomas stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the sun rise over the blood-stained snow. The world had changed for him in ways he never could have foreseen. He had once been a man without a home, a wanderer with no allegiance. Now, he was something else entirely. A warrior. A rebel. A man with a cause. And as long as the northern wilds remained untamed, he would fight to keep them free. He had thought his journey was over, but it was only beginning. There were more battles to fight, more enemies lurking in the shadows. And Thomas knew that his name would soon be whispered across the wilderness, carried by the wind like the stories of old. A legend in the making. He had found not only a cause, but something deeper, something unspoken between him and Marguerite. A future yet unwritten, a destiny intertwined with the fate of the northern wilds. And in that realization, he no longer feared what lay ahead. He embraced it.